There are small things in a marriage that you learn to stop questioning. A phone left face down on the counter. A to-text notification that disappears before you can glance at it. The particular way a person's voice drops half a register when they think you aren't really listening. You notice all of it. You notice the way you notice a creak in the floorboards at 2 in the morning. But you tell yourself, it's just the house settling, and you go back to sleep. I found the portfolio case the night before our flight to Vancouver. Colin and I had been married for 6 years. He was 43 and ran a commercial real estate development company with offices on Bay Street. I was 37. I had spent 5 years before our marriage working as a financial analyst at a firm in Mississauga. Spreadsheets, regulatory filings, quarterly performance reports. I was good at my job. I liked my job. But when we got engaged, Colin sat me down at the kitchen table one evening and said, in the gentlest and most reasonable voice he could manage, that it would make more sense for me to step back. His schedule was demanding. Travel was constant. He needed someone who could anchor the household and be present for the social obligations that came with running a company. He didn't say, give up your career. He said, be my partner in a different way. I believed him, the way you believe someone when the words are dressed up nicely enough and you still think love is a solid enough thing to stand on. That night, I was packing my carry-on for the Vancouver trip. Colin's company was sponsoring a panel at a real estate investors conference at the Fairmont Pacific Rim. I had been invited, the way I was always invited to things, as the wife, there for optics, expected to smile at Vaspen's moment and not ask questions about the numbers. I packed methodically. A change of clothes, toiletries in a clear zip bag, laptop, charger, book. I always double-check the outer pockets. Old habit from my analyst days, when a misplaced USB stick could mean a very bad morning. My fingers found it in the slim outer zip pocket of my carry-on, a flat, dark brown leather portfolio case, about the size of a tablet, with a small brass zip around 3 sides. I didn't recognize it. I stood in the middle of our bedroom holding it for a moment, just holding it, the way you hold something unfamiliar before you decide whether you actually want to know what's inside. Then I opened it. Printed wire transfer summaries, 4 transfers over 3 months, each one over $40,000, originating from Colin's company account and landing in an account under a woman's name. A printed copy of a property deed transfer form, partially completed, with Colin's signature in one field and the other name typed clearly in the recipient field, Ingrid Biasolale, and a single printed screenshot of a text conversation, the sender names cropped off at the top, but the message body clear enough. I'll carry the originals through on Audrey's side. She has no corporate connection. She won't be flagged. Make sure your story is straight before we land. Ingrid Biasolale was Colin's business partner. She was 38, precise and controlled in everything she did, always the last person to laugh at a joke. I had met her at company dinners, at a charity event in the Distillery District, last November. She called me Audrey in a tone that managed to be both warm and dismissive, as if she had already placed me in a category, and the category was simply not a concern. I stood in the bedroom for a long time. In the living room, Colin was on a call. His voice was low and even, and only one sentence drifted clearly down the hallway. She'll go through first. It'll be clean. I did not cry. I took photographs of every page inside the portfolio. 8 photos, clear and close. I uploaded them immediately to my iCloud. Then I placed the portfolio back in the outer zip pocket exactly as I had found it, smoothed the fabric over it, and zipped the pocket shut. He came to bed around 11. I was already lying down, eyes closed. I felt him settle on his side, heard his phone go dark on the nightstand, and I lay there in the quiet thinking about the fact that my husband had described me, to whoever was on the other end of that call, as a container. A clean passage. Something to move things through without suspicion. I didn't sleep much, but by morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Ingrid was waiting for us near the Air Canada check-in at Pearson, wearing a sand-colored blazer, a canvas tote on one shoulder, and a wheeled carry-on at her side. She smiled when she saw me. Audrey, you look wonderful. I smiled back. Ingrid, good morning. We walked together through the terminal, Colin just ahead of us making a call, Ingrid and I moving side by side. At the Cat's bins, I set my carry-on on the belt and said to Ingrid, casually, that I needed to grab something from the outer pocket. Could she watch my water bottle for just 1 second? She said of course, turning to drop her tote onto the moving belt. She had left it unzipped. I had 30 seconds. I slipped the portfolio out of my outer pocket and tucked it into the open mouth of her tote, beneath a folded cardigan sitting on top. The belt moved forward. I straightened up, placed my carry-on behind hers, retrieved my water bottle, and walked through the scanner without breaking stride. No alarm. I collected my jacket on the other side and waited. Ingrid's tote went through the X-ray machine. On the other side, a KTSA officer raised one hand and stopped the belt. "Ma'am, we need to do a secondary inspection on this bag." Ingrid's expression was the particular mild irritation of someone who travels frequently and finds delays beneath them. "Of course," she said. Colin had cleared the pre-board lane and was walking over, adjusting his jacket. He frowned when he saw the officer holding Ingrid's tote. He stepped forward. "Is there a problem?" "She's traveling with me. It's just business materials." The officer unzipped the tote and lifted out the portfolio. I watched Colin's face from across the inspection station. The color went first. Then the particular stillness that settles over a person when they realize they are standing in a room where the walls have just moved. "Who does this belong to?" the officer asked, opening the portfolio and laying the contents flat on the inspection table. Ingrid shook her head immediately. I didn't put that in there." Wire transfer summaries, a property deed with 2 names, a printed text screenshot, a few people in line behind them craned their necks, someone raised a phone. Colin looked at me. I was standing near the collection bins, holding my boarding pass, wearing the expression of a woman who has noticed something confusing happening, but can't quite work out what it is. "That's mine," he said. His voice was not quite steady. "I was going to give it to my wife. Reference material for the conference." I stepped forward slowly. I looked at the transfer summary spread out on the table. I looked at Ingrid. I looked at Colin. "Reference material," I said. It wasn't a question. My voice was quiet and completely even, about property transfers into Ingrid's account. Colin's mouth opened and then closed. "It must be a mix-up," I said pleasantly. I picked up my carry-on. "I'm sure it's fine." And I walked toward the gate. On the flight, Colin came and sat beside me 40 minutes after boarding. The man who had been in the seat moved without too much persuasion. Colin kept his voice low, his eyes forward. "Don't read into this," he said. I was looking out the window at the tarmac. "I'm not reading into anything. Those are internal company documents. Ingrid manages the receivables for the Kelowna project. The account structure is for tax efficiency. It's complicated. I used to build risk models for pension funds, Colin." He said nothing. His jaw was tight. He kept touching his watch, the way he does when he is choosing between versions of a story. "I'm not going to have this conversation on a plane," he said finally. "You've been explaining," I said. "I haven't asked you anything yet." He went back to his own seat before we reached cruising altitude. The conference hotel faced Burrard Inlet directly, the mountains behind North Vancouver, enormous and pale through the floor-to-ceiling windows. That evening, there was a welcome dinner in one of the hotel's ballrooms. Colin linked his arm through mine walking in. He introduced me to every person in the room. My wife, Audrey. A developer named Fletcher from Calgary shook my hand and said warmly, "Colin talks about you all the time, says you keep the whole household running, must be a full-time job." I said it kept me busy. I held my wine glass and smiled, and did not mention that I had once spent 2 years building a proprietary compliance model that the firm still used. Midway through dinner, Fletcher leaned across the table and said to Colin cheerfully, "Good thinking, having Ingrid handle the Kelowna receivables directly. I sent the updated numbers over to her last week. She said she'd move it through the account before month end." I watched Colin's hand go still on his fork. I watched Ingrid look down at her plate. I set my water glass down carefully and added that sentence to the note I had been building in my phone all evening. Colin drank more than he should have that night. Not visibly. He knew how to manage it in public, but by the time we were back in the room, his precision was gone. He sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Stop doing whatever it is you're doing." I stood by the window. He lay back still dressed and was asleep in minutes. I sat in the chair by the window with my phone and my notes until well past midnight. The next morning, I told Colin I was going for a walk before his first panel session. Instead, I took a cab to a TD branch on West Georgia Street and asked to speak with someone about verifying account information connected to a potential financial dispute. I had the photographs on my phone, the account numbers clearly legible. The branch manager, a careful, even-tempered woman who gave every impression of having seen everything, confirmed after some back and forth and a look at my marriage certificate that the account receiving the transfers was registered to a numbered company with Ingrid listed as the sole director. The numbered company had been incorporated in BC 14 months ago. She didn't share the balance. She didn't need to. I thanked her and walked out into the Vancouver rain. There is a particular feeling that comes when a suspicion becomes a fact. It isn't relief exactly. It's more like the floor of a room finally holding your weight properly. You can stand on it now, even if what you're standing in is wreckage. I called my father that afternoon from a bench near the waterfront. He was retired in Fredericton, a man of very few unnecessary words. I told him I needed to talk. He said he had time. I told him what I'd found. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he said, "Do you have everything documented?" I said yes. He said, "Then trust yourself to know what to do next." That was all. It was enough. The following morning, I found Ingrid in the hotel lobby cafe. She was at a table near the window with her laptop open, a coffee beside her. I sat down across from her without asking. She looked up. She closed the laptop. "You know why I'm here," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Her hands closed around her coffee cup. "Colin told me it was temporary," she said finally. "A way to move funds outside the compliance audit window. He said my name on an external account would look cleaner than a corporate one if anyone looked. And you went along with it." I wanted to believe it was just a structural thing. She looked out at the street. That's different from believing it was right. I looked at her for a long moment. In her face, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not guilt exactly, but the exhaustion of someone who has been holding a shape they can't keep much longer. "You should retain a lawyer before Colin does," I said. "Today, if possible." I left before she could respond. That afternoon, I called Douglas Favreau. Douglas and I had worked together at my old firm for 2 years before he moved into corporate law. He picked up on the second ring. I told him everything: the portfolio, the transfers, the numbered company, the text message. He listened the way a good lawyer listens, without emotion, filing information in order. When I finished, he said, "Audrey, what you're describing, if those documents are what you say they are, this is not just a marital matter. Routing corporate funds through a shell account without disclosure could bring Colin before the Ontario Securities Commission. Ingrid, as the named director, carries personal liability. What do I need? Everything preserved and backed up in multiple locations. A family law lawyer, separate from me, for your side of the divorce. And patience, this will take time." I told him I had patience. He said he'd start making calls the next morning. On the flight back to Toronto, Colin tried once more. He came and sat beside me after takeoff and said, very quietly, that whatever I thought I saw, I was misunderstanding it. I turned and looked at him directly for the first time in days. "Colin," I said, "I spent 5 years assessing financial risk. I know what a misappropriation structure looks like. I know what a numbered shell company looks like. You used my bag because I have no connection to your company and wouldn't appear in an audit sweep." His throat moved. "Please don't explain this to me as though I'm someone who doesn't understand numbers." He didn't speak for the rest of the flight. The night we arrived home, I cried. Not in front of Colin. I was in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub, for about 10 minutes. Not because I was still in love with him in any complicated way. Because I had loved him once, genuinely, and I had given up something real to build a life alongside him. And what I had built turned out to have a different foundation than the one he'd shown me. That kind of loss deserves a few minutes of honest acknowledgement. Then you wash your face. Then you go back out. I slept in the guest room that night and the nights that followed. Colin moved around the house carefully. We were polite. He seemed to understand that the window for further explanation had closed. 3 weeks later, Colin's company board convened a special meeting. Douglas had made a quiet call to Bertrand, one of Colin's co-founders, who had already been growing uneasy about the Kelowna receivables. The forensic accountant they brought in confirmed the transfers within 10 days. Colin was suspended pending investigation. Ingrid's numbered company was referred to the Ontario Securities Commission. She retained her own counsel. I retained a family law lawyer and began asset division proceedings. I also called a contact at a compliance and risk team at a financial firm in downtown Toronto. There was a position open. I took it. Walking into that office on my first day, in a city I had lived in for 6 years. But somehow drifted away from professionally, felt like being handed something I had put down in a crowded room and not realized I'd left behind. The divorce took just under a year. It was not easy. Colin's legal team tried to argue that my years out of the workforce had diminished my professional standing. My lawyer pointed out that I had personally identified a six-figure financial irregularity that triggered a regulatory investigation by the OSC, using knowledge directly from my professional background. That argument did not go anywhere useful for their side. On the day I signed the final papers, I drove back to my apartment in the annex, a two-bedroom I had moved into 8 months earlier, and made coffee and stood at the window looking out at the street. It was October. The maple on the sidewalk had gone entirely red. A streetcar went by. A woman walked an elderly, unhurried dog along the pavement. Everything ordinary. Everything exactly where it should be. I thought about what I had walked away with. Not the settlement, though that was fair. Not even the job, though I was grateful for it every morning. I thought about standing at that Cat SA inspection station, watching the portfolio laid open on the table, and knowing, in the clearest and most unambiguous way, that I had understood exactly what I was looking at, the moment I first held it in my hands, that I had not panicked, had not dissolved, had not waited for someone to tell me what it meant. I had photographed it, uploaded it, made a plan, and carried it through. He put that portfolio in my bag because he thought I was the safest, most invisible option he had. The person least likely to look closely. He was wrong about that. He had been wrong about that for a long time. I don't know what to call the thing that carries you through something like this. I don't think it's toughness, exactly. I think it might just be the refusal to pretend you don't see what is directly in front of you. And I think, standing at my window, holding my coffee, watching October do its slow and reliable work on the maple outside, that there are far worse things to walk away from a marriage with than the knowledge that you see clearly, and that you always did.